Hello, everyone, and
Hi,
welcome.
welcome, welcome.
So we thought we would do a talk tonight since a lot of you guys have interviews coming up.
Woo, excited. It's
Very exciting.
awesome.
And so it's,
Congratulations, by the way, if you got called. Like that is super, super, super exciting. Um, yes. But before we get started, could we just verify that like we're coming in across okay, like you can hear us and let us know where you're tuning in from.
yes.
Which city, state, wherever. And
Where are you currently located?
where are you located? And if you got an interview, you can show that off as well. I'm going to UOP or I'm going to UCSF. That would all be fantastic. Okay. So while we wait for that, I think it's important to note that there is a time delay between when we talk and when that becomes delivered to you. We will be checking the chat room and things like that, but because there's this delay, we're kind of always talking from the future. So yeah, just keep that in mind, FYI. And yes, if you can see us okay, if somebody can just put that in the chat room, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so you guys should, hopefully everyone's on the YouTube channel where they're watching this. I mean, that's the only way, really.
Yes.
So yeah, there's that chat box. If you don't see a chat box for some reason on your right of the video, then you may need to reload your page and just, sometimes it gets funky when it loads. But just if anyone can say that they can hear us, that would be awesome.
Awesome. And while we wait for that, I do also want to make sure that you guys already watched our 3-part video series that we put out there. Thank you, Nadia. Confirmed. Where are you guys tuning in from? And have you gotten an interview call? And if you did, congratulations. Super happy for you. Um, yes, so I just want to make sure that you've seen the videos that we put out. It's a 3-part video series. I think the total length is close to 2 hours or maybe even a little bit longer than that. Very information packed. We put so much effort into watching it, into creating it. They are only going to be available for you to watch until tomorrow night, midnight. So please go watch that
Just put
while
that
it is still up.
in the chat box, so you should be able to see that.
Yes, the link is in the chat box.
Cool.
Awesome. So we have Monica that's still waiting for interview calls, and Sahia Sela. Great, I'm so glad you saw the videos. That's fantastic.
Great.
Okay, so yeah, go watch those videos. I think you'll find that super helpful. And we'll be expanding upon what we talked about in those videos. So I think if you watch them already, it'll make a little bit more sense. But in either case, we're going to keep the replay for this one up as well. So stick with us, go through this, and then watch that series. And if you had any holes in terms of what we're talking about, that should probably fill it all up for you.
Totally. Well, this is exciting. I mean, as we mentioned in the videos, if you guys have seen some of those and stuff, this is a busy time of year. It's an important time of year, and we just keep hearing from both our members and also not, people out in the Facebook groups and all over the place that people are getting interviews this week, getting interview calls, and being notified of that, especially through some of the West Coast schools. And there's more upcoming. This is just the first stage, so it's definitely an exciting time of year. It's a busy time of year, and we're hoping that if you're listening to this, we're hoping that you're one of those people. If you are not yet, we hope you'll soon be one.
Yes. Kevin, Archna, I might have totally butchered your name. So sorry if I did, is requesting that you speak a little bit
Oh,
louder.
okay, good to know.
Thank you for that. And yes, as we go, if you have any input or feedback, just put it in the chat room. We'll do our best to keep up with it as we get into our content. And yeah, I think that's all. And really, like, if you have an interview call and like this is the first one, or like whatever the scenario may be, just remember you really only need one school to say yes to you. And that may very well be the only school that gave you the interview call too. That's actually a pretty common scenario as well. So
Right.
whether this is your first interview or your fifth interview, kind of take it as like, this is the school for me kind of attitude. And attitude is important. I think it'll take you a long way. So shall we get started with our content?
Yeah, sounds good. All right. I
Oh,
will
we
do
should
my
introduce
best to speak a
ourselves.
little louder. Yeah. Hopefully, if you guys can let me know if this is a little better, I'll do my best to speak a little louder. I'm Kevin,
And I am Dr. Alyssa.
and we have been part of IDC for the past 3 to 4 years now.
This is our fourth cycle.
So we've been with you guys. We're just really, what keeps us going is, like we mentioned in some of the videos, is that we keep hearing back from people every single year. All of the every time someone's accepted into a school, into an advanced study program, we hear about that. And I was reviewing some of the emails that we've gotten back in the past few months, and I couldn't believe the number of people who were excited to share that they just got into various programs. Colorado being a big one this year, and a bunch more. I mean, Buffalo. We've had some folks get into Buffalo. We've had some folks get into Loma Linda recently, or get back good words from Loma Linda. And so those are still coming and emerging, but a lot of other ones. And I was just super excited to hear about those.
Really, your acceptance calls, that's what keeps us going. Yeah, we do a little celebration for every email we receive, and that's really why I do what we do. It's our fourth year. It's been extremely rewarding. The first applicants that we worked with are practicing now, which is amazing. It's so cool to get those emails and be like, hey, like, do you remember me? I'm practicing. And I'm like, of course I remember you. That's fantastic. So I hope that'll soon be you, and it's not that far away. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started.
All right, I'm gonna switch us over to our presentation, so bear with me for a minute.
If you have gotten a call, most often you get 3 weeks, approximately 3 weeks, maybe a few more days, give or take, between the time when you get the call or the notice that you've been invited up until the interview day. So, which is why we chose this 3-week period, in terms of like, if you have 3 weeks to get going, what would you need to do in those 3 weeks? And by the way, if you have any questions about anything, you see that email address at the very top of the screen right now, mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. Just shoot us an email. We are there always. Okay.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. So I have some notes here, but shall we just get into them? What do you think?
Yes, let's head over to the next slide.
Let me switch that. All right, so here's the first one. This is week 1. So, you just got that invitation, as Dr. Alyssa says, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I know that we know that feeling. It's exciting, but it's also nerve-wracking. You have 3 weeks to prepare, not very much time. And we've worked with a lot of clients over the years and that are in this position, and it's not uncommon for us to get a call or to get an email and be like, I only have 3 weeks, what do I do? Now, in this situation, we can definitely help here. I put at the top for both the bench test and the interview, well, the first step for us is enroll in something that is going to help you get that mentorship that you need. Now, of course, I'm biased when I say that, but I don't say it just because of that. I say it really because most people do need some help in some way. And while there's a lot of stuff out there, I put, definitely that we have something called the bench test mastery and the interview mastery, which are 2 pieces to really help you with both sides of these things. And we're going to get into what you can do once you've gone into those, specifically beyond that. So I'll let Alyssa start off and just talk about some of the things that I think are, or she thinks are the most important in terms of the bench test.
Practicing for a bench test in 3 weeks is not easy. This is a lot. So first, full disclaimer, like if you have more than 3 weeks, that would be ideal. If you've been practicing, that would be ideal. But, you know, life gets in our way. It doesn't always happen. So if you haven't done anything, it's been, I don't know, a few years since you touched your handpiece, whatever your situation may be, you just got called for your bench test and like now you need to go, what do you do? First thing is, like, really, as Kevin said, don't, Kevin, your screen is showing your Google instead of my PowerPoint.
That's helpful, right?
That is very helpful. Do you want me to be sharing the screen instead?
No, go ahead. I was just looking up how do I actually
totally maximize it?
Oh, there you go.
Could you change it back to week 1, please?
Oh yeah, so there you go.
Thank you. Okay, so sorry about that. Seriously, like if you only have 3 weeks, like the shorter the time you have, I think it's more important that you spend it very, very wisely. So I'm going to say that while, yes, it is ideal if you had been practicing for a while already, but if you really only have 3 weeks, then get guidance. Like, don't do this on your own because you haven't done this before, right? Or if you have, like, it has not quite worked yet, and there was a reason for that. So, like, go to whether it's us or others, like people that have been doing this for a while, because once you do this for a while, like you just know the ropes. You see a prep and you know how to guide the person to get to the next level. So don't do it on your own. It's just not worth it because remember, like you only need one person to say yes to you, like one school to say yes to you, and like risking that is so not worth it. So I'll be happy to work with you, or anyway, seek guidance. And this is very counterintuitive. My next point, tabletop practice. I put this up because I really do mean this. I know that it's very stressful when you only have a few weeks to go, and the last thing people want to do is to practice tabletop. The reason I put this in, even when you only have 3 weeks, as like the very first piece of advice I'm giving you, is because it really is that important. Most schools around the world that are not the Northern American continents, which if you're watching this, that's not where your primary education was from, teach in a very clinically oriented manner, right? Like we learn about these ideal preparations very in depth, actually. We learn it a lot. So we know exactly how to take tests and draw things out and things like that. But that never really translated to actually performing them. And performing and knowing, they are, I have to say, they're totally, completely two separate things. And even if you saw patients for a long time and you've done all these different things on patients, doing an ideal preparation, I want you to think of it as a totally different skill set because it really is. Like, it's so rare that we'll be like, oh, make sure that that isthmus doesn't go over a millimeter, and oh, that chamfer, like you need to keep that 0.3 to 0.5. And you know, like small 0.5 millimeter is, like 0.5 millimeter is like giant in dentistry, and it's like so tiny in real life. So if you're not quite used to dealing with it, which you're probably not, then you need to practice this tabletop first. If you cannot do an ideal preparation on the tabletop, there's like no way you'll be able to do it on a mounted typodont. And starting from mounted typodont is kind of like trying to jump to the top of the ladder from the very beginning. You're just gonna keep like stumbling down and get bruised. It's not really taking you anywhere. I know there's a lot of advice on Facebook and Student Doctor Network saying like, oh, hey, you only have that much time, like practice unmounted as much as you possibly can. I have to completely go against it. And I've seen this, I've worked with many, many people. You have to take some time to practice tabletop. It just will not work. It's like you're trying to figure out too many things at once and learn too many skills at once. And really just like going one step one step and climbing up the ladder steadily, that's what's going to get you to the top, not trying to jump to the top and keep falling down. So really do practice tabletop first, just knowing that if you cannot do this prep on tabletop, there's no way you'll be able to do this on a mounted type 1, especially if it's an upper. Oh my God, right? So please do that. Some things that people wonder around the handheld tabletop practice is like, is it okay? Like, do I have to like put my Typodont on the tabletop and like not lift it up? Or like, can I like lift it and move it and angle it? Like the answer is you can absolutely do that. There are some schools that take tabletop tests, and for those you separate out the lower and upper jaw. So don't leave the upper jaw on there, like it just doesn't really work very well. So just put the upper jaw to the side or lower jaw to the side, whatever you're working on, and just hold it in your hand. You can tilt it. Yes, you can approach the patient from the throat. Only when you're working on a handheld Typodont, because it doesn't have that hinge part because we separated it out, which is a huge advantage. Still doesn't matter. Just know that right now all you're trying to do is figure out like what it feels like in your hands to do it, what exactly goes into it. And you got to know the features and the whys for each prep. And if you saw the video series that we just talked about, and we dropped a link to that in the chat room, I talk about this there as well. If you know the features and the whys, it's like, if I just say it very simply, a crown is a crown is a crown. It doesn't matter what tooth you do it on. And the principles behind the crown is the same for any tooth, right? Like we learn it in our starting textbooks as like crown preparations, and these are what crowns are like, right? Like that's how we learn it. And then we go into each tooth. So like the features and the whys for each prep, like knowing the why especially, not just like in a book smart way. We all know that, but like really drilling that down and like write out your list for that, because like that's what you're going to use when you practice to compare against your actual prep. Okay. I divided preparations into 3 broad categories. Class 2s, just all in all, posterior crowns and anterior crowns. Posterior and anterior crowns, they take a little different, it's very challenging to, let's say, just expand upon the posterior crown and go to the anterior crown, even though I do want you to start from a posterior crown. Anterior crowns are very difficult in its own unique kind of way. So I divided it into those 3 categories. And let's start from class 2. When you first start, just focus on the occlusal part first. And I'm not saying like don't do the box. All I'm saying is if you try to expand on too many features at once, you'll kind of like get nowhere, because like the list of all the requirements your preparation needs to hit, it's long. And I do not want you to try to hit everything at once. It will just not work. First of all, it won't work. But second of all, it will also blind you in terms of what are more important criteria to hit than the other. And this also, I go into depth. I think it is a second video of the series. I really kind of poured my heart into it while I was talking about it. I really want you to watch it. Not all criteria are created equal. Like there are things that are more important than others to hit. And there are a few criteria that if you miss those, you are more likely to get a lot of points deducted than others. So knowing that not all criteria is created the same, it only makes sense for us to all try and hit the most important criteria first, right? And there are lots of them. So like for each crown, for each preparation we do, for each tooth we work on, just try to work on like 1 or 2 features max. Start from the most important features, and that's like all you want to like zero in and kind of focus on. So for class 2, it makes complete sense to first only focus on class 1 part. When I say class 1 part, I'm talking about the depth. I'm just gonna guess that it's been a while since you used a handpiece. So like you gotta get used to that first. Like I had just had somebody, one of our members that haven't practiced in a while, right in our inside our member website, there's a forum, and she just wrote there like, my handpiece feels so heavy. like things like this are gonna happen, right? Like, you just have to get used to it. So don't think that you're gonna like try and do everything week 1. Just focus on the class 1 part, the depth, holding the handpiece again. It's been a while, steadying your hands, really focusing on your hand skills. Like you're holding the typewriter in your hand, right? Like, so like you can see what you're doing like right in front of your eyes. You can't do that when you're working on a mounted typewriter. It's important to go through this phase first. So like hold it right in front of you and like look at how you're holding your handpiece and what kind of marks it's leaving behind and how much pressure you have to give to move it that much through these typewriter teeth, because the typewriters may be different from what you used back in your home country, all that kind of stuff. So please do that. For posterior crowns, I want you to first focus on chamfers and occlusal clearance, okay? So work on full gold crowns before working on anything with a shoulder margin. Shoulders, you want to start practicing it after you kind of get to know how to create a really, really good chamfer. And chamfers, in and of itself, that already is a really, like, it's challenging to create a chamfer that is so thin while also working on the walls, because, you know, you work on both at the same time, right? Like when you prep the walls, that's when a chamfer gets formed. It's very difficult to do that part well, and it's more difficult to make it into a shoulder because there's like that much more to structure to reduce. So start from your chamfer and start from your occlusal clearance. And notice how I'm not saying occlusal anatomy. Not concerned about that just yet, okay? We're really concerned about the fact that you are creating enough clearance with the opposing tooth for the crown material. That comes first. Later comes the anatomy, drilling it down, okay? Anterior crowns, do start it if you are going to a school that may ask it, but don't start here. Wait till like day 4 or so, like you've done a few posterior crowns. That's when you want to start with anterior crowns. Don't just jump into it. So anterior crowns is like the last thing on the list for you to start. Let's see. Arsha asked which schools are tabletop. That's USC and UCLA. And very nice. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So that's all for week 1 for me. But if you have any questions about it, feel free to put that in the chat room. And now I'm going to hand it off to Kevin so he can talk about how you should spend your week 1 for your interview. Kevin, are you here? Uh-oh. Okay, while we wait for Kevin to come back, let me check the chat room one more time to make sure there is not. Okay. Nadia just asked how much indirect vision is important. Step by step, remember? You have to start from step by step. You cannot start from not having practiced in a very long time and go straight to indirect vision. How important your posture is and stuff like that really differs from school to school. UP and UCSF are not the most important 2 schools where, like, honestly, the only school that indirect vision becomes extremely important is Loma Linda, because they actually like tap you on the shoulder if you're like hunched over. If you're like hunched over, they will like come around and like tap you on the shoulder and be like, you can't do that. But no other school does this. And so while it is ideal if you can do it, it takes practice and you may not get there by your test day. And I'm not saying like, I don't want you to do it. It's just that you may not be able to. Okay, so, and everything, I mean, everything becomes irrelevant if you can't even do it even on a handheld typewriter. So just see how far you can get, but don't get hung up on indirect vision just yet, because really, you need to take your first step forward, right? So that's going to be important. Vishnu is asking, ideal burst for full gold crown. Let me take a sip of water first. So for the occlusal part, you want to use a 556 or something like that. 556 is different from 56. It's just a carbide burr, parallel. It cuts really fast. There's a lot of occlusal reduction to do. And it has little slots in it. So like, don't use 56 thinking it'll be the same thing. They're completely different, okay? And then for the sides, it's 856016. For the interproximals, use 856012. Now, I think UCSF may not give you a 556. I think they only may give you, what am I saying, 856016s, which is totally fine. In that case, you can just use that for your occlusal reduction as well. Doesn't matter. Like occlusal reduction, you're really only using the sides of the burr, like the tip of the burr doesn't matter, right? Like it's not like a chamfer or a shoulder where the end shape, the end part of your burr has a huge impact on what you're creating. And Kevin, I think Kevin is back. Yes, it's really like echoey, but yeah, we can hear you. Let me just finish up what I was talking about and then I'll hand it off to you. So yeah, you can use that. So 556, 856016, 856012, you're good to go for a full gold crown. Okie dokie, Kevin, let's talk about interview. How should we spend our time?
All right, so in terms of the interview for week one,
Kevin, I'm really sorry to interrupt. It's extremely difficult to understand what you're saying. Do you want to like try and go out and like come back in one more time?
Yeah, I'm gonna try it.
Okay. All right. I'll just.
You can't hear me now, right?
Oh, this is so much better.
All right.
It's clear. Okay, let's go.
Well, let's try this.
Yes.
For the mock interview, okay, for the interview, I'd like you to start with something called the self mock interview, and that's something that we have actually we built into our interview mastery course. It's a video that you can watch, get the idea for like some of the basic questions that you're going to encounter, and then basically you're recording yourself through that process through a webcam. You can use YouTube if you want and make it private. You can just use, if you have a Mac or a PC, there's some video recorders. And I really recommend people go through those questions and respond as if they're prompted to. And what I do in that interview video is I actually prompt you and ask you to respond, and you can pause me as you do that. Now, if you don't have that video, that's fine. If you're not part of the course, you can also go on the net and look up common interview questions that you can expect to do. But the idea is to go through some of the major questions that you can expect in your interview and practice them on video. Now, once you've done this, the next step, of course, is going to be to review that. And so going through and seeing what you look like is going to be a big one for you. Seeing how you come across is really important, and will give you an idea of what you're going to actually come across, how you're going to actually come across during your real interview. The other thing I want you to do on week one is create something called like a notebook or portfolio. I want you to start working on that. Now, I just actually got off the call a few hours ago with a candidate who was wondering if it was even okay to bring in notes to his interview. And I said, yes, absolutely. Not only is it okay, but I encourage you to bring something called a portfolio. I talk about this in the course, but you can buy them for like $20 at Staples or Office Depot, and it doesn't have to be real leather, but it can look like real leather. It's black plastic usually. If you want to get a real leather one, you can do that too. It doesn't matter so much, just as long as it looks professional and nice. And inside is usually a place for put your pen, and the place to put some CVs, place to put your SOP, a copy of your SOP, and I would bring those to the interview. I'd also bring, it should have like a notepad in there, maybe a legal pad or a regular yellow notepad. And that should be a place that you can start putting notes. And I want you to start filling that up. I want you to buy one of those the first week and start filling it up with common ideas that you might need through the interview, maybe stories, maybe common qualities that you like to talk about yourself, about why you're a good candidate. Put bullets in there, put notes, put things, don't write complete long sentences in there, because you don't want it to be something where during the interview you're going to look at these notes and be like, I don't know what I wrote here, it's this long essay. You want to have like ideas, thoughts, words, things that you can pinpoint quickly, maybe underlined things. And that's where you're going to start working on building that first week. So as you're going to go through this next 3-week process, you're going to want to actually put stuff in that you learn from this process. And so the first thing you want to take notes on is I'm going to ask you to go find a mentor. Now you may work as a dental assistant right now, and you may have a dentist who you work under. That's your first mentor. If you have a professor that you're in contact with, maybe you're part of a research project, there's a mentor there, whoever your boss is. Maybe you have a friend who's already working as a dentist. Maybe an acquaintance, maybe it's your dentist that you go to in town. Whatever it is, or whomever it is that you can go to. And I'd like you to actually get out of your comfort zone. And if you can actually go and visit them personally, in person, in a physical world, that would be great. If you're not, you're just in a place where you can't do that, you can do a Skype call, you can do a phone call even. But really, it'd be great to go to them and say, listen, you know me pretty well. We've worked together now for a little while. What would you say are my strongest qualities as a candidate and as a dentist? And as someone who's in the dental world, they may not have seen you practice, but they should, at least if they're working with you, they should have an idea for how you are as a person, but also how you are professionally. And you're going to want to write some notes in your portfolio about that. And what did they say? Not just like, what do you think I should do to improve my interview skills, but actually, what do you think about me as a person? Reflect back on me, who I am to you. What do I look like? What's my strengths and what are my weaknesses? And ask for honesty, and they'll be able to give that to you. That's stuff that you can use in your interview. Finally, list the most difficult questions that you encountered during your self-mock interview. Write down what those words, what were the ones that were toughest to come up with, toughest to respond to, and write those in your notebook as well. We're going to get to those in week 2. So that's all I have for week 1.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And there is a question for you. Amen says, there are a lot of questions in the internet, but who knows like what a good answer is? What would you say to that? Kevin? Did we lose you? Okay. Well, we'll get to that answer when Kevin...
No, I'm sorry, I'm back. I thought I didn't realize I was muted. So it's a good question. We're going to get to that in week 2. We're going to start to figure out how to strategize about those. Obviously, that is one of the reasons that we recommend getting actual support from someone beside yourself. Yes, you can go to friends who've been through a process similar, or they're a working dentist. Yes, you can talk to your family members, your spouse, your mother, father, etc. They're going to give you some thoughts on that. They're going to be able to help you. But it's never a replacement, to me, in my opinion, of having true mentorship from someone who does interviews, who knows interviews through and throughout. And that's obviously the reason we created the Interview Mastery. It's because a lot of people had those questions, like, how do I respond to this? How do I respond to that? And through the course, we actually guide you with that. And then we have a 2-hour mock interview, which we guide through that as well. So I would really recommend, the other thing you can do is, if you need another resource, of course, is with those same mentors. You can ask them, try to pitch them questions and be like, okay, well, here's what I'm thinking of saying for my strengths and weaknesses. What would you say if I were to say this? And, especially those of you who work as dental assistants, if you have like a dentist that you work with, ask for, just if you can say, hey, I have a few questions about my upcoming interview. Would you mind if we spent a few minutes after work today or after our last patient talking about that? And maybe, hopefully they can give you 20 or 30 minutes of their time and ask some of the most questions that you're having the most trouble finding responses to. That would be my thought about starting, of course, if you don't have a resource like the Interview Mastery course. But there's lots of different resources out there, even on the internet too.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I know there are a lot of questions happening in the chat room right now. It will, it's kind of going up. So, but anyway, we're doing our best. So do stay patient with us, and we may not be able to get to everybody, that's for sure. But seriously, whether they're the bench test or the interview, like if you only have 3 weeks, I think it's totally not worth trying to do it on your own. Like, what are you risking? Another application cycle? Okay, bench test, week 2. Now it's time to move on to mounted, okay? I hope you spent week 1 diligently practicing on a handheld type-rond, even though you're anxious to move over to a mounted type-rond. I appreciate you patiently waited and spent your week, and I'm sure you learned a lot by doing so. Review principles. I do not say this lightly. Like, review principles. Like, bench test preparation is not just about practicing hands-on. That's one part of it, and it is a huge part of it, definitely, because you have to perform with your hands. But if you don't have the principles, and if you're not always looking at the principles, looking at what you did, and figuring out, okay, I did this, I didn't do that well, I did that, I didn't do that well. If you're not doing that, then what are you doing? So review the principles and really try to self-grade yourself for every single preparation you do. When you write out the feature list, you really want to start from the important features. And like, when you realize that you didn't hit a feature, ask yourself, is this a feature that is so important for this preparation, or is this like a little bit less important? And I know like it's hard to say like, oh, some features are more important than the others. Again, please watch the video series that we put out. Like, I go into it a lot more detail. I don't have enough time in this workshop right now to go into that, but I lay it out in much more depth there. So please go watch it and see which like features you're hitting and not hitting. And when you practice, really try to hit the important features first. Yes, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is ideal preparations. Thing is, if we do not start, there is no ideal preparation is even possible if the preparation is first not clinically acceptable. And this sounds so obvious, but it happens all the time. Bench test mastery members will send in their work and they will ask me questions, and like because they ask me questions when they send in their work, and they'd be like, hey, is my reverse S-curve good? And I look at the prep and I'll be like, you have unsupported enamel. This is not time for you to be thinking about an S-curve, which is a nice to have feature, because we need to work on your unsupported enamel issue, which is a clinically detrimental issue, right? With the preparation, like if you have unsupported enamel, the patient's gonna go home, chew on it, it's gonna sliver off, secondary caries, all that kind of stuff. But like, that is a important part, right? And unfortunately, these hypodont teeth do not have enamel rods. When there are enamel rods like normal teeth, like real teeth do, unsupported enamel is much easier to deal with. But when they don't have it, like these, it's something you have to actively work towards. Okay, so always review your principles, have them next to you for every single prep you do, self-grade everything. Now, and for each prep, think of just incrementally improving. Like, last prep, this prep is just going to be a little bit better in this aspect and this aspect. Choose 1 or 2 max, that's it. Don't try to hit every single thing. Okay, hit 1 or 2 max, just focus on those. And those should be critical parts for your preparations. Now, for more specifics in regards to class 2, I asked you to, in week 1, to start from class 1. Like, I didn't say like only do class 1, but I said like just focus on your class 1 portion of the preparation more intentionally. Like, you're gonna totally bomb the box. You will, week 1, that's okay. But really, if you do, because that too is like step by step, right? Like, if you can't do a very good class 1, you just cannot do a very good class 2. It's just very, like, it's kind of a prerequisite to like do better on the next one. So week 1, that's where you really intentionally focused on. Week 2, now we can go to the box. And I wrote exit angles because it's so important. Make sure you don't have unsupported enamel, okay? That is much more important than reverse S-curve, please. So get those points down and seriously write this down, because like you'll ask yourself like, oh, I don't like my reverse S curve, but really what you should be looking at is 90-degree exit angles, no unsupported enamel. For posterior crowns, you already worked on full gold crowns there. Now it is time, now that you know how to get a good chamfer covered in week 1, right? And we provide sufficient interocclusal clearance. Also, we worked on it on week 1. Now it's time to actually like fine tune the preparation itself. So the degree of taper, making sure that there's no like ski jump interproximally. Now is actually the time where you can actually start thinking about the occlusal anatomy a little bit more, preserving it as much as you can. Things like that comes in week 2. It's also the time to start preparing for PFMs for posteriors and premolars. Do this towards the end of week 2. Premolar crown preparations, if that is like one of the things that you need to practice. Not everybody needs to do it, but if it's something that like you need to do for your school, do this towards the end, the later part of week 2. For anterior crown preparations, first half of the week, you're still focused on central incisors. This prep is very, very difficult, okay? Later part, you do want to move on to canines, and you do want to kind of juggle them, but don't just start from like canine, like day 1. And an important thing for anterior crown preps, and I mean, this is an important part of every crown, right? If a crown can only have 2 features, that's going to be taper and occlusal clearance. For anterior crown preps, that taper part needs to be stressed so much more, because almost every new member that comes in and sends their work to me, almost without fail, the first few anterior crown preps lacks taper, almost always. So I want you to really focus on, again, you should have your list of features that are important for the prep, right? And look at your prep and be like, does this have taper or no? And like by taper, like you should visibly see it. It shouldn't be, if I like look at it really, really hard, I think maybe I have like a degree of taper. No, that's not the taper we're talking about. There should be no doubt when you glance at it that it actually tapers. And if you make a mistake actually in the taper portion of the crown, it is better to over taper it than to under taper it, okay? Because if you over taper it, it's still clinically acceptable. I mean, within a degree, of course, but oftentimes patients come with pre-existing crowns that are really, really tapered, and we can still do a good crown there, right? But if you under taper it, the lab's gonna struggle. You can't seed it all the way. Like you just cannot work on this any further. If there is no taper, the lab is going to send you back your impression and be like, doctor, there's a taper, please touch up the crown and re-impression and send it back to me. Or they will just like grind out the dye from the inside and send you another model coping thing that you can put in the, anyway, so it's a long story. You don't want to do that. Like that is a really, really big mistake in a crown. So that is important. And I do want to touch up on one question that I saw somewhere in the chat room earlier. Do you need to polish crown preps? No, you do not polish crown preparations. Crown preparations need the coarse burr finished surfaces, right? Because you're supposed to cement on a crown afterwards. Like by getting rid of the burr streaks, the coarse lines across, you're adding nothing to the feature. And like a smooth, slippery, polished surface is not on anybody's criteria. So I don't know where everybody keeps getting this idea that like crowns are supposed to be polished. But no, if a crown is polished, you're interfering with the cement. Like the friction is real, like you need that, okay? So like, no, again, focus on the important parts of the preparation. Like whenever you have a question like that, ask yourself, like, what really is this? Like what really is polishing this preparation, adding on to this, the feature? Like, why is it important for the prep? And maybe the answer is it isn't important or it's not super important. You know, depends on like what question you ask yourself. But yeah, really like think through it. Like I want you to really think through it, because somebody said like, what preparations do we have to practice for USC? Like, I don't know, because USC, like we have no idea what they're going to ask. Every single year, they're going to surprise you with something. So you just need to be prepared to get surprised the interview day. And because of that, knowing your features and the why behind each features, the principles, so that you can translate that into any prep you're doing, it becomes that much more important. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it off to Kevin for week 2 of the interview preparation.
All right, cool. So on week 2, my encouragement is for you to go at this point and you've done the self mock interview, you've talked to your mentor, you've gotten some background information about what you're going to say on your interview, you prepared a notebook. Now it's time to do a real mock interview. Now that's kind of an oxymoron, because it's mock means fake, and I'm asking you to do a real mock. So that being said, this is the second level practice. This is before you go and do the real thing. This is as real as you're going to get it before you actually go to a real interview. Now, yes, you could go to a real interview and use that as a practice, but that's a waste of a lot of money, time, and a whole cycle. So why do that? Make the most out of every interview you have by doing a mock interview beforehand. This is going to prepare you. We do recommend that you do this at least 2 weeks before. If you only have 3 weeks, then it's fine to do this on your second week. If you want to do it earlier, you can, if you're kind of know that you're a person who needs extra time. But I've talked to a lot of candidates who've done it 2 weeks before, and that's about right. That's fine. The good thing about doing it 2 weeks before is that it's still fresh in your mind. And so you're going to do that mock interview. Again, we do them here at IDC. We have someone, an interview expert named Sarah. She's excellent, and some of you have even worked with her. But the point is that you need to find someone who can really guide you through and present to you not only the questions that you're going to expect from the particular program you're going to, because every program is different, but also you want to have someone help you strategize and talk about what went right and what went wrong. For our process, we do the mock with you. It's usually about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how quick kind of you are. And, sometimes people speak a little longer per question than others. So we give that amount of time for the actual interview. But then the rest of our session is really strategizing and going through each question every question that you gave and responded to. We go through your responses and we talk about them and figure, okay, here's what you said for your strengths and weaknesses. This is how it hit me, and this is what I'd recommend. So a lot of people will give us a strength, for instance, such as, my strength is that I'm too dedicated or I'm too hardworking. And so we'll give them some feedback on that and be like, that's a very common answer, actually. In fact, that may be the most common answer. And when you do that, when you give those kind of common answers, guess how it makes you look? It makes you look like every other candidate out there. And so that's the kind of feedback that we give, because we've listened to so many different responses, especially, that we can really give you an idea for whether you're coming across as an extraordinary candidate or extraordinary, or if you're coming across very average, or if you're coming across very below average. So you really want to be as strong as you can. Once you're done, you're going to review that mock interview and strategy session. And so we're going to be able to process that. We send that to you usually within 24 hours. And if you need it earlier, we can send it to you that day, depending on how upcoming your interview is. And you can go through and we really ask you to review that and get the feel for how you're coming across in that interview. Again, similar to the self-mock interview where you watched yourself on video, but it does make a difference when it's someone else asking you those questions, I find. It becomes a little more real and you become a little bit more on your toes, I find. So going through that, getting an idea, making notes on that. This is a time where I'd like you to, in your notebook, create a new list of problem questions that you have. New problem questions come up for you each time. Maybe the first interview you did, it was tell me about yourself. Maybe the next interview you do, it's tell me about your a specific issue that you are trying to respond to. Maybe there's something in your CV or something in your experience so far that needs addressing. Like maybe there was a huge gap on your CV that you weren't really doing anything. You weren't working, you weren't at school, you were, you know, in the middle of a bunch of personal issues. Those need to be addressed. And so those are the kind of things that you need to be writing down is how am I going to talk about that? How am I going to talk about that gap? Or how am I going to talk about that low GPA or whatever it is for you? And everybody has different issues. And finally, you're going to start to practice those responses. You're going to practice them with a spouse, with a friend, with a family member, whomever you can. And also you can practice them again with video and listen to yourself again. That's what I would do if I were in your shoes. Had 2 weeks now. This is the kind of stuff I'd be recommending. You know, we also have something in our course in the Interview Mastery where it's called How Do You Respond? And you can submit any question you're having problems with and get a feedback video that we'll do that. I do them, and we'll post that in the member site for you to review and see, you know, kind of our take on how you should respond to a particular question you're having trouble with. Now, a couple things came up. One was, you know, a couple questions I saw was, will they be asking you questions about research that you've done on the interview? It's very possible that they will, and especially if your CV mentions research or you've done some research, they'll want to talk about that, so be prepared. What if you don't have research and your CV doesn't mention research? Yeah, you still may get that question. It's very likely you will at many schools, and especially if the school is a heavy research school. There are some schools that are not. You know, UOP is not a heavy research institution, whereas UCSF is. So very different schools, and they have different intentions. So yes, you may be asked about your research experience. A lot of people don't have, you know, a lot of international students when they come, in my opinion, my experience, don't have really strong research backgrounds in their undergrad. I mean, you know, it's possible they did, you know, additional studies or additional research projects there, but a lot of times they don't. And so they might have, you know, a simple research project that they were required to do. You know, you're going to need to talk about whatever you've done to the best, you know, and create the best version of that story that you can. It doesn't mean you want to lie at all, but it means that you want to talk about, you know, your understanding of the process, your approaches to the process and to the project, and, you know, give them, you know, an overview of what your experience is. You don't have to pretend though that you were, you know, this award-winning researcher if that's not the case. In fact, that would be dangerous. So you want to be honest. And if research is not your whole deal, if you haven't done any research projects in the US, that's okay. Talk about what your strengths are, because everyone does have strengths. And a couple other questions that have come in is it helpful to bring my own treatment cases in the personal interview? You know, bring treatment cases if you can, if you have them. Bring treatment stories, or you know, and I assume that's what you're talking about. You don't have to have them as official presentations, or you don't have to have exactly like anything in paper. But if you can keep in mind a few, that would be excellent to have that and bring those with you and talk about, especially ones that were more challenging or required some advanced treatments. Those are great examples. And the more stories you have and the more case studies you have that you've experienced one-on-one, you know, personally, the better that you can talk to those kind of questions during your interview, because they will come up. We talked about research. I'll go through a few more of these because we're going to save some questions for the end. But questions related to your weaknesses in dentistry, you know, that's a tough one. In terms of talking about your weaknesses, you don't want to, you know, you have to be careful what kind of weaknesses you talk about. You don't want to talk about weaknesses that make you look like a careless practitioner. So, you know, saying that you didn't do something that you should have done, you know, saying like, you know, there was one that came up recently where the individual should have taken x-rays. He didn't take x-rays before because the patient was very persistent. And so, you know, that kind of stuff you want to avoid talking about. You want to show that you're someone who does pay attention to detail. So it does make it a tricky response. Like, how do you talk about a weakness that's related to dentistry? A lot of times you can talk about just, you know, patient interaction. Maybe you, maybe the patient, maybe you heard from an assistant that the patient was really worried and scared, and then you kind of looked back on the situation and was like, oh, you know, I wasn't as warm as I could have been to that person. I didn't explain myself as well to them. And so that's one mistake you can make without making an actual clinical kind of mistake. And so you kind of want to, I would say you want to avoid the clinical mistakes as much as you can, unless they're very harmless little mistakes that have no potential or very little potential for harm to the patient. Even though you may have had real mistakes where you did either harm the patient or could have harmed the patient, those are ones that I don't want them to remember. I don't want that to be the last thing that sticks in their mind about you. And so those are some ideas. Interviewing, like I say, interviewing is a tough thing. So we have a lot of questions coming in, and a lot of people want to say like, well, what should I say for this question? And that's the challenge of interviewing. It's not an easy thing to come up with unique questions that fit you and that are different than the other 50 people there that day. Because if you sound like 50 other people, even if it's a great response and 50 other people said it, it's no longer a great response. So that's part of the reason that we work one-on-one with people to come up with unique strategic responses. So yes, we'll do our best to kind of give you an idea of what direction to go with these, but we can't actually really give you a specific black or white response on how to respond to something. So anyway, that's week 2. Let's move on to week 3 now. And I'll move the slide 1 second.
Okay, so week 3, that means that at the end of this week, it's time to go for the interview. And it is nerve-wracking. And I know there's like a lot of things are going to be running through your mind when this time comes. Like you're going to be nervous and like really, really nervous. So the first thing I do want to tell you about week 3 is like, there's nothing I can say to be like, oh, hey, don't worry about it. Like the bench test is a big deal. I'm not gonna like say that, but don't forget to take deep breaths and just be like, and spend time objectively evaluating and kind of like try putting yourself in the grader's shoes and be like, okay, what do you think the grader is looking for? And there's going to be like the list of features that each preparation needs to have, like class 2s, it has to be convergent, the isthmus should be 1, and the contact should be barely broken, and the depth should be 1.5. Those things, write them off and see which ones you hit and which ones you didn't hit. At this point, you're going to be like continuing to work on each prep, and it is time now to literally, it depends on really where you're going, but California schools or the San Francisco schools will usually give you a list of possible preparations they can ask along with the tooth. It's going to be written something like upper molar crown prep or lower molar class 2s or like anterior crown preparations. There's going to be that list, right? So you should have parsed it all out and be like, okay, I need to practice class like MO on 19 and 30 and like da 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 da. So there should be that list, right? Now it's really time to practice all of those and make sure that you're comfortable or like you know what to do if that is like given to you that day, so that it's like not your first time doing it, if possible. This may not be possible if you're going to USC, but for other schools, it should be possible. It's also time to time yourself. And I just said class 2 1 hour and a crown an hour and a half. If, let's say, a school asks for 1 class 2 and 1 crown, according to what I said, that adds up to only 2.5 hours. It's pretty common that you'll get up to 3.5 hours for 2 preparations. I just didn't want you to get rushed. So you can like add 15 to 20 more minutes to each preparation, but trying to finish a class 2 in 1 hour and a crown in 1.5 hours, it's a good number to shoot for. I don't want you to be thinking about this really until week 3 though, because in the beginning, I really want you to take your time with each prep. You can take 3 hours for a class 2, no problem, because you're like getting familiar with things, right? Until you can actually do it well, you cannot do it timed well. There's no point. Like, so in the beginning, just spend all the time you need and really go slow. A lot of candidates make the mistake of rushing through each prep. It's not so much about quantity. Yes, quantity is a player in bench test preparation, but at least equally as important to that is the quality of the practice you're doing, making sure that you're very intentional about improving 1 or 2 features per tooth, that you're just making sure that this tooth is just a little bit better than the last. If you incrementally, just a little bit, keep going up, you're gonna get pretty darn good by the end of 3 weeks. But if you panic and be like, oh my God, I made the mistake again. Okay, screw it, I have to do another one, I have to do another one. Like that kind of speed-oriented mentality, and I know where I can come from because the list of things that you may have to do may be long, but it's still not gonna help you. So that's why I'm not recommending that you try to practice all of the teeth on your list until week 3, and that you don't try to time yourself until week 3. Calm down, take deep breaths, and really try to make sure that first your preparation is clinically acceptable. And I said clinically acceptable, and by this I mean the important features are hit. And somebody asked, like, how do you know which one is crucial or critical and which ones are less so? That video, the series that are up, and Kevin, could you share that link one more time? That would be great. In that series, I'm not,
Sure.
actually don't remember which of the 3 videos, because there are 3 of them, I talk about, but I actually talk about this in depth, and this is just, it is gonna take too much time, and it's there for you to watch. So after you get off this call, just go straight there and like watch it. And the replay for this is going to be up until tomorrow evening as well. So, and along with those videos, so like take notes while they're still up. Like they're very important points that I share with Bench Test Mastery members like all the time. So that is that's where you can find stuff. And there are a few other questions, and we will be like going through more questions at the end of it. But like by week 3, you don't really want to be bringing anything new, or towards the end of the week 3, you don't want to like bringing a lot of new things. Like by now, your foundation should be solid. You should know how to make a good, even if it's just 2 or 3 teeth, you know kind of what goes into doing a good upper molar full gold crown and a good upper central PFM or all ceramic, whichever one. Like you know what goes into those, and now you can like expand those principles that you have. Like if you can do a really good molar crown prep, you can do a pretty good premolar crown prep even if you never practiced it. But if you try to like do all of it at once, it just becomes really overwhelming and you won't be taken very far. So focus small first, really master it, and then spread out. And week 3 is that time. And you don't want to be introducing any new principles. That's really what I want to say. Not like you don't want to practice any new teeth. Like keep expanding on new teeth, that's fine. But by now, hopefully you have all of the principles and you kind of have a way that you work, like you've learned your own tendencies. And those should be drilled down by now. And now it's really just practicing like your weak points, because we've been practicing all this time, focusing on 1 or 2 features to improve upon each prep, right? And if you're practicing every day, and you should be, by now you should have nailed down a lot of the features of the preparations. And so by now, the only ones that should really be left on your list are things that just make an ideal prep an ideal prep. Like that's something more than what a clinically acceptable prep would be. So we should no longer be working on convergence. Hopefully that's done by now, and it should be, right? We should really, at this time, we'll be working on flowy outlines and 1mm isthmuses and things of that nature over like, oh, your exit angle's off. Like, no, that should have been taken care of in week 2. So really like, take that kind of approach. But don't forget, it's very easy to lose sight. Once you start focusing on those less critical features, but like features that make an ideal prep, it's very easy to lose sight of the critical features again. So never forget, and always have your criteria sheet next to you. Clinically acceptable has to come first. You never compromise what makes the critical parts of a preparation to make that a clinically acceptable preparation. You never compromise that to make something a little bit prettier or smoother, like ever. Okay, so yes, that is it for week 3, and hopefully with this, you're ready for your bench test. And I'm going to give it over to Kevin now.
Great. So yeah, I put the link in the box there. Of course, remember if you've already filled out your email and you've already done that, you can just go to your actual emails and look for. We've sent them all out this past week. If you don't see them in there, if there's a specific one, you'll just be taken. You can put your email in again; it won't hurt, and then you'll be taken to the right video. 1, 2, or 3 once you do that. So week 3 interview, like Dr. Lissa said, this is a week where you don't want to be introducing too much new stuff. You want to be kind of like polishing stuff, working on your strategy, making sure everything sounds right and looks right. I'd really recommend, if you can, do a second mock interview. You can schedule that. If you're part of the Interview Master, you can schedule that with us. And a lot of you will be able to do that if you sign up for the California Special, which we'll talk about later. There's a second mock interview with me. It's more like a mock session, but we practice a lot of those answers, and I have you go through and create, basically respond to the ones that you had most trouble with. And then reviewing that second mock interview video as we record that is also going to be a part of that. So if you do a second mock interview, practice. This is how people get good at interviewing. It's not by just showing up with a bunch of theory. Same with a bench test. But it's so true. Review that. You practice and then you look at the feedback. The feedback is that review video. It's that video that you can see yourself, and you're going to get feedback also from your interviewee, who's going to help you, either Sarah or myself. And we're going to give you what you need to work on. Next, I want you to kind of practice your body posture. And, just quickly, your body posture, think about how you hold yourself. Are you standing tall? Do you slouch or do you stand tall when you walk around? Look at yourself in the mirror, get some feedback from, again, family, friends, spouse, etc. And even if you need to take a video, you could do a selfie video. Do whatever you can to get an idea of how you present yourself. Take a video of yourself with your iPhone or Android, set it up, and go and shake someone's hand. You can do that with a friend or so, or a family member. Shake their hand and walk into the room, and watch how what kind of messages are you sending that are nonverbal? Are you exuding a sense of confidence? Are you exuding a sense of fear and nervousness? What does it look like? And watch that. Get that feedback of yourself. So make sure body posture is important. We've I'll mention it here, and we put this video in the course as well that you can watch. But there's a great video on YouTube that you can look up by Amy Cuddy, AMYCUDDLE, I believe. And just look that up. It's a TED Talk on body posture and interviewing, and you can review that. Definitely think about your body posture. Do some exercises related to it before the interview. Again, self-mock interview. I know I'm beating this one down. If you have a time, do a self-mock interview that 3rd week. Do one more. You can use the video that I have in the Interview Mastery course to do another final mock interview with yourself. Just do that practicing. And then finally, prepare your interview notebook. This is the portfolio that we talked about. This has your notes in it. And you can have these notes, your CV in there, your SOP, any other kind of things that you want to bring. Someone mentioned bringing pictures and treatment cases and photos. You don't have to bring that stuff. If you want to bring it, you can. If there's something that you really are proud to show, like some research, like if you're published, why not bring a paper, or at least an excerpt of your research paper if it's too long. But print out a few things and just say, here, this is what I published. Wouldn't that be great if someone asked you about your research and you were published and you said, yeah, I am published and here it is. Here's the excerpt, or here's the whole darn thing. And you'd be able to pull that out of your notes. That would be fantastic. So that's why you bring that folder with you to your interview. You don't want to leave home without it. It's more important than bringing your purse in there, I can say that. And so prepare that for the next day. Rewrite your notes. Organize your notes so that when you walk in, you have at least one sheet of reminders, of bullets of qualities that you have, examples that you can refer to, stories that have all been thought through, so that when they ask you to talk about a time when you did this or that, you don't have to be like, oh shoot, I'm blanking out. You can look at your notes quickly and they'll come to your mind. Now, someone asked me earlier, oh, well, that's inappropriate. I can't just bring notes into there. They're gonna think I'm cheating. Cheating on what? This is not a closed book exam. This is your life. You have the right to write down like a kind of a notes of cheat sheet kind of idea. We're kind of in this mentality that we grew up with, that interviews are like tests. They're not exactly like tests. They can be like tests in some ways, but there's nothing secret about your life. You're the one who can bring a note and some notes to remind yourself. And so if you're kind of nervous about whether you can bring that in or not, what you can say to them is, at the beginning, you can say, do you mind if I take a few notes during the interview? It really helps me think and get my mind going. And sometimes I need to write down the questions for me to be able to process them. If they say no, okay. I've never heard of anyone saying no, though. And most of the time they'll be like, oh yeah, that's fine. We'll be taking notes too. So you can bring those in. You can make notes during your interview as you go. And then finally do a wardrobe check. Take a picture, again, another selfie of yourself, dress up a few days before. Make sure you have some time if someone needs to change, if you need to buy a new tie, if you need to buy a new blouse, that you have some time. Give yourself some time, but take some pictures ahead of time and try everything out. Make sure everything still fits right, and send a picture either on Facebook. If you want to put it on Facebook, you can say, hey, what do you guys think? Which suit do you like better? Or which shirt do you like better? Which blouse do you like better? Get some feedback, and get some feedback from your friends about what they think you look best in, what makes you look most confident. So those are some ideas. Also, if you want, you can always, if you're part of the Interview Mastery course, there's a way to message either Dr. Alyssa or myself in the course, and you can always upload a photo of yourself and ask for our thoughts on that. We can be happy to give you some feedback. So I think we've covered some of the basics of week 1, week 2, and week 3. Now, I want to talk, before we kind of get into more questions, we have a lot of questions that we're going to talk about, but we want to talk really quick before we move into the questions about what we're offering with this special, because obviously there's a lot going on about that. But before that, let's just kind of break down a couple things that Dr. Alyssa and I thought, before you go off to your interview, your bench test, there's some items that you definitely need to remember. So do you want to talk first?
Sure. Yes. So these are just kind of overall encompassing things. First, because a lot of people wonder, like, do I have to use loops? If you have 3 weeks till your interview, forget it. You do not have time to get used to loops and do good preps. You don't have time. Loops is something you want to start on 2 months or so before your interview. The longer they have you, better. But if you have 3 weeks, forget it. Don't use loops. Always remember clinically acceptable first. Do not make any mistakes that makes the preparation you did clinically unacceptable, okay? There are different degrees in mistakes, and you always want to stay within the clinically acceptable realm. Keep going back to a handheld typewriter. Do not forget to do this. Week 1 was the week where I asked you to practice purely handheld, right? Even week 2, once every 2 to 3 days, do 1 prep, or do practice strokes. Practice your chamfer again on a handheld typewriter. It's very important because our hands become sloppier when we move to a mounted typewriter. I mean, we are striving to make that sloppier hand steadier, but it is important to keep the bar high by reminding your hands what it is like to do that good chamfer, for instance. It is very important. Otherwise, you kind of forget all of the practice you did week 1, when you practiced for a chamfer for the first time, and then you just keep going, and then you just keep making the same mistakes, and you kind of lose touch with what was exactly that ideal that you were going after. So keep going back to handheld typewriter, whether it's for a full prep or just parts of the preps. If you're struggling somewhere, if you're struggling at a certain aspect of a preparation, always go back to a handheld typewriter. Self-rate every preparation for every feature. Okay, every preparations. I think this is not emphasized enough. I think this is not done enough. Very rare that somebody will go through a checklist and be like, all right, I know my weak points. Accumulated over time, that's going to show you your tendencies. That's going to show you what mistakes you keep on making. And you know what? If that's the case, just focus on those, right? Like, and then your prep is going to be so much better than just blindly practicing. Please don't do that. And finally, only focus on 1 to 2 improvements at a time, because focused, right? Focused energy, that's what's going to bring you progress. So really take 1 to 2 features, drill down on them, make sure you feel comfortable with them, and move on. Okay, now Kevin.
Okay, so in terms of your interview, just remember these last things. Number 1, be conscious of the nonverbal messages you're sending throughout your interview. Now, we talk a lot about how to respond verbally in the course and in just these workshops, but we also talk about nonverbal messages. And so what's an example of a nonverbal message? Well, one is again, I think showing up unprepared, showing up either looking sloppily, your wardrobe not looking great. Maybe you have mismatched clothes or colors. That's a verbal communication that says, I don't know how to dress and I don't care enough to try to learn. Another one is showing up with no notes, no CV, no SOP backups. Now, again, they probably don't need a copy of your CV, but showing that you have a folder, and when you open that up, they can see copies of your CV in the pocket or copies of your SOP, shows that you're somebody who thought ahead and was as prepared as they possibly could be. There's other kind of communications, not making eye contact. We'll get into that. The next thing is making eye contact. What you're saying is, I don't either respect you, I'm scared of you, I'm not telling the truth, so I'm going to look away and avoid all eye contact. There's a lot of things that can be implied mistakenly and assumptions made with not making good eye contact. Now, does that mean that you should stare at them blankly the whole time? No. It's fine to, as you're asked a question, look down or look up in the air to collect your thoughts and think about it, but don't lose eye contact for too long. When you're ready to kind of address the question and respond, look at them again, look at the person who asked, and also look at the other person who didn't ask if you're in more than a one-person interview. Look at each person, try to give fair attention to everybody and equal attention to as many people as you can during the interview. I always am uncomfortable when we're in a meeting, and some of the females in the audience can relate to this, I'm sure. But sometimes I'm in a meeting with a man. Maybe he's in sales, or he's trying to sell us something, or he's a business. Maybe he's a potential partner, or he's like a client. Either whatever the situation is, and I notice that he's always looking at me and like somehow ignoring the female that maybe I'm in a business meeting with a female too. It's a very rude thing. What is that person communicating in that situation? Is the female's not as important as the male here. So I'm going to look and keep looking 70 to 80% of my attention at the male in the room. Men have a tendency to do that. For some reason, men have a tendency to keep looking at other males and avoiding eye contact with women. If that's something that you think might be happening with you, practice being in a room, in a formal room with a male and a female, and making sure that you're not doing that if you're someone who deals with that as a male. It's something that we need to be careful of, and it's something that everyone needs to be careful of. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're a female and you only give attention to males and you avoid eye contact with men. That could be happening too. So whatever your situation is, make sure that you are giving eye contact to everyone. I said it before, look impeccable, dress impeccably, go get help from your friend who's a fashion expert. Think of the best, their friend that has the best quality or best taste in fashion, and talk to them, get some ideas from them. Finally, the last thing I want to say is be specific. People will give me generalities, and they give in interviews, they often give generalities way too much. They, again, I was in a mock interview recently, and the candidate was saying, I really like, this program because of this, this, and this, but everything that she said was very general. It was something that I could apply to almost any school I can think of. And so you really need to be specific about what you like about a school. You need to be specific about what qualities make you a good candidate. Not just, oh, I'm a hard worker and I'm a really nice person. Those are not specific qualities. They don't tell me anything about who you really are. So make sure to be specific when you're talking about and giving your responses. And with that, we're going to get into questions. I just want to go over real quick, what we're offering here. This is really the 3-week solution for those of you who are freaking out right now and like, oh my gosh, I have all this, this interview coming up. Maybe I'll get another one in a week and I don't know what to do. This is why we came up with this bundle, and that's why we're offering it right now. But we also wanted to throw in stuff that would really help you for this upcoming interview season. And so besides the bench test mastery and besides the interview mastery, which you can buy as a bundle regularly, we're adding a bunch of other stuff. And I'll go through and just say it's going to be a great help to those of you. And all this stuff, even with the extra sessions we're including, yes, you can schedule them as soon as possible if you sign up and need this done immediately. Do you want to talk about a few of them, Melissa?
Yes, definitely. This interview is so important. Like, really, you only need one school to say yes and you're done. Like, you don't have to go through application again next year. Oh my God, right? Like, and that's going to get decided in a few months. And you may only have one interview, but I wholly believe in giving the best shot for that one interview you have, because who knows, maybe that's going to be that one yes that you needed. And we really wanted to make this a no-brainer, easy decision for you, which is why we've come up with the best packaged offer we ever have. Yeah, this really is the best offer we've ever put together. And honestly, I think you should take advantage of it while you can. It is only available to take advantage of until tomorrow evening, and it will be gone. So it includes the bench test mastery, the interview mastery with the 2-hour recorded feedback, and it includes a whole hour to talk to me. You can talk to me about anything you want. Oftentimes people will talk to me about specific hand skills related thing, like bench tests. They'll be like, hey, I keep making this mistake, or I'm really having a difficult time understanding what a 90-degree exit angle really looks like. Or I don't know why I always make undercuts on my crowns, and help me get over it. Things like that. Great time to discuss that. You'll be surprised how much we can talk about in an hour. It also includes a hour-long session with Kevin, which is like the perfect time to do a follow-up mock interview. So after, like Kevin talked about this, but after you do your mock interview with Sarah, review the recorded version, and Sarah's gonna tell you what your weak points are and how to do better and all that kind of like feedback so you can progress, right? This is a great time to make sure that you have progressed. And you probably are gonna have more questions about, hey, well, I didn't remember this when I did my mock interview with Sarah, but now that I'm practicing my answers, I'm wondering how to address this part and that part. So that is a great way to spend that 1-hour session with Kevin. It also includes our workshop All Access Pass, where all of our past workshops are recorded and they're stored there for our members. Like this workshop, for instance, I think we've provided with you, hopefully with valuable things. The replay will be available for everybody up until tomorrow evening, but afterwards it will be taken down, but it will remain in the member area. And there are a lot of workshops like that. We've done workshops around indirect vision. Somebody asked about that, like how to even start training for indirect vision, because that's a very difficult topic. There is an over hour-long workshop just talking about common pitfalls that people make in class 2s and how to better approach it so that you don't fall into that category. There is another one, over an hour-long session, just about crowns, dedicated to the exact same topic. There's another one about how to position your patient. Oh my gosh, there was a workshop for practically anything. And by the way, if there's a topic that you wish was covered and it's not covered, tell us, because we will cover it, because we do workshops every other week, right? And there is a one-pager for every university that has advanced standing programs. So it includes information about the applications, the bench test, the interview, what the past applicants said, things like that, all inside our member-only area. And the value of this entire bundle is $19.85. But today, tomorrow, you can get all of that for just $13.47, and that is less than the price you would pay just to get the bench test and the interview mastery. Amazing, right? I told you, like, we wanted to make this decision easy for you. Like, this season is important, and I want you to fully take advantage of it. Kevin, are you still here?
Yeah, and I'm going to put the link in the chat box. Again, special offer link. You can click that. You will get to the sign up page for that, and that page that I put the link to will not be available after tomorrow at midnight Eastern time, so it will just disappear. So definitely don't wait. Advantage of that now. It's the it's the thing that'll really help. So great. I think at this point, we're going to talk about some of the questions that you guys put out there. We know that there are a lot. We're going to do our best. We don't have too much time left. But we'll take a few more minutes and respond to a few more that we think are going to be helpful to you guys. And then again, if you have any more questions, you guys who are part of our courses, feel free to send us a message through the course site or put a message up on the forum to really encourage that so other people can learn. But this is all it's about, is just making sure that everybody feels comfortable and confident about themselves when they're walking into these things. So we know that these questions are important.
And any other questions, put them in the chat box. Like, we can't promise that we'll get back to every single question, but we'll do our best. So yeah, if you have any other questions about the bench test or the interview, the process itself, or about our courses, just feel free to just shout them out. And should I start addressing a few questions first?
Go for it.
Okay. Somebody asked, what do you mean by review principles? Can you detail? By that, I mean the feature list that every prep should hit, and the why behind the list. That's like the more important part, is like knowing why, because knowing the why will tell you whether it is a critically important part of the preparation, or if it is I can't say it's nice to have, but it's one of those features that are nice to have, that is listed in the ideal prep features list, but violating that will not render this preparation worthless, basically, which some features are like that. So that's what I mean. And in that video link that we shared with you, if you just scroll up a little bit in the chat room, you should see that video link still there. Like, I go into critical, non-critical, or less critical mistakes, and so do watch that. And somebody asked, what should we focus for USC? Another person asked, which schools ask for 3/4 crowns and MOD onlays? I'm going to wrap this question up into one. That school that has the possibility of doing so would be USC. USC, I don't know what's going to be asked. I honestly wish I had an answer for that, but I have no idea. But the thing that I do know is you cannot do a good MOD onlay, or you can't do a good onlay of any kind if you don't already know how to do a good class 2 and a good crown, because MOD has features of both a cavity and a crown preparation, and it's kind of like combined together. Extremely important to know that. So, and USC, as like odd as testing items can get, they will probably not ask too out of the ordinary things. Like, if they decide to ask one thing that is out of the ordinary, like a onlay or a 3/4 crown, the other item that they ask for a prep, because it's gonna probably, I can't say how it's gonna be at all, but it's likely gonna be 2 preps and something else. From those 2 preps, 1 prep is going to be an ordinary prep, a class 2, a crown. It's gonna be one of them. So whether you're going to USC or not, or whether you're thinking about expanding your practice into onlays or not, you always have to start from those cores, and it's always class 2s and crowns, and that's really where you should start. And somebody asked, if you're planning to apply for CAPED next year, if I join this course tomorrow, will everything still be open for viewing until my next year? Absolutely, yes, it will be. We really want you to make it this year, but like for you, like you didn't even apply this year. The courses are yours to keep until you get accepted. There is no, let's say, time constraint on when you need to use the mock interviews or the consulting sessions with Kevin or myself. There's no constraints about that, so you can keep all of those bonuses and use them when you're ready. And as I said, this is like the best deal we put together. So I think it'll be pretty smart to take advantage of it right now. And Kevin, do you want to hit on some interview questions?
Yeah, so, a question I thought, which was quite good, was, what are some topics that you can ask at the end when they ask you, do you have any questions for us? This is one of the most difficult questions for me to answer, because a couple things. I want to give you the best, I want to put you in the best position. And so one little trap would be if I gave you like an exact answer to ask, then everyone who's going to an interview who's watching this would just show up and they'd probably ask that question. And then suddenly that question no longer sounds original and unique. It sounds like you just copied it from somewhere, or you're not thinking for yourself. So how do I get people to think and basically ask original, unique questions that set them apart? It's a challenge. So with that being said, what I can do is steer you. I can steer you in the right direction. Research and details and specificity. Research a school. I've said this 1,000 times, but I still go into mock interviews with clients or with candidates, and surprisingly, they haven't done any research about the school. I say, oh, do you have any questions for us? And they just say, oh yeah, when do I find out about when I get accepted? Or they'll ask, what's your favorite thing about this school? But they don't ask specific questions about, that are related to the program itself. You can always find unique aspects of the program, whether it's the way they teach, the way the program is run, special projects that are going on, special research projects that are going on at the university. You can always ask specific, detailed questions. And those are the kind of questions that when you ask them, they show that you've done your research. They show that you've invested time. And that shows that, again, it's about the message you're sending. The message is, I care. I care enough to have spent a good amount of my Saturday figuring out about your school, versus I didn't do any preparation. I'm just showing up cold turkey. So they'll appreciate a specific question that shows that you did research, even if it's not the best question in the world. Even if it's an easy one to answer, you'd be surprised how appreciative they'll be of that, because a lot of candidates just don't do it. Now, when it comes to, someone say, oh, I don't have any experience with root canals. What can I say about that? Don't lie about it. If you haven't done any, if you haven't had any root canals, I would say, talk about what you have done. Talk about what you can that makes you unique. If they say, have you done any, and you haven't, you can just say, no, I haven't gotten a chance. But, Dr. Alyssa, do you want to say, there was something that you mentioned that I liked so much, and I think it'd be worth repeating.
Sure. So that was me. I had not only not done any root canals, I graduated from a school in Korea that gave me extremely limited clinical exposure in terms of hands-on training. So I had not done a single crown on a patient. I had not done any root canals on a patient. And I had done, I forgot the requirements, but honestly, the requirements to graduate was like 2 or 3 restorations. The school wanted me to do a class 1 because it was going to be too much work supervising my first class 2. And a couple of extractions, and I know most of you at least have a lot of experience in extractions. I didn't even have that. I was 2, but honestly, it wasn't, I ended up becoming an assistant, right? Because it was my first one. So yeah, that's the extent, that was the extent of my experience clinically when I went to interview. And what I said, but instead of having hands-on experience seeing patients, what I did have a lot of experience was a lot of assisting and a lot of observations. in each department, and we had a lot of faculty that were treating, so we had access to really, really good practitioners. So this is what I said, unfortunately, I haven't had that much hand-on experience yet. We did not have that many patients that came through our school, so the requirement quota was very low, and it was just what it was, so we did what we could. But instead, we had the privilege of observing faculty a lot. And that really taught me in every department. And that really taught me how different practitioners approach different cases. And it helped me grow an eye for what's good and not so good. And I went on to say that I think that if you go from learning in books and like practicing in Taipuran straight to working on patients, you actually kind of have a hole there, because you want that kind of really see somebody do it. And I said, look, so that's where I'm at. And I think by coming into your program and getting a lot of hands-on experience, that's very complementary to the existing education that I've already gotten. And I'm very confident that I will come out of it really good. That's what I said. I didn't lie. But it's all about how you present yourself. I could have stopped at like, no, I haven't done any root canals. Oh yeah, I did 2 restorations. That's where I could have stopped, because that was the question. But I didn't stop there. I went on to turn it around and be like, but this is why I should come to your school, because, and even though I don't have this experience, I have this strength instead. So you always want to turn that into it. So hopefully that helps.
That's a great point. And to Dr. Alyssa's point about turning it around, don't apologize for your experience. It may sound like they're criticizing you by asking, have you done a root canal, or have you done root canals and you haven't? It may sound like a judgment. It's just a question. Don't take it as a judgment. Really say, well, this is where I'm at. This is what I have done, and focus on what you have done. Focus on the good and keep reminding them of all the good qualities about you. So I think that's a way to go. Clothing. Do you have to tone it down, in terms of fashion and dressing things up in a fashionable style, even if it's formal? Should you tone it down to look classic? No, I don't think you should tone it too down. I mean, it depends. I mean, fashion's has a huge range, right? So if it's hip, great. If it's too hip, there is such a thing as, I guess, being possibly too hip and being like way too, like if you're way ahead of the curve. It depends. I mean, if you're that kind of person that you're so ahead of the curve fashion-wise, I'd probably trust you. You probably know what is going to look good at every situation. But if you're not sure, if you're not a great dresser and you're not the most fashionable person that you know of your friends, and you're going to go and say, hey, I've heard this style is like the hippest, trendiest thing, let me try it, but you don't know what you're doing, I would probably, be careful, avoid that. Go for the classic look in that case. But I wouldn't worry too much about, again, we talked in one of our workshops recently about flair. But what I mean by that is, something that stands out, something that can make you a little unique and look a little more like an individual and original than some of the other candidates. You don't want to end up looking like every single person there. So again, if you're part of the if you're part of like the interview course, we talked a little about fashion in one of our recent workshops that you can check out. And so another great one, personality-wise, should I be very casual in conversation or formal, serious or funny? This is a great question, because some of the most successful candidates that I've ever interviewed were naturally funny and made a few jokes. I was also one too. If I can, during an interview, I will find opportunities to make humorous comments. They're tired. Your interviewers are tired. They've been at this all day. They need a break, and it's what's great is comic relief. And so the trick, of course, is say something that's genuinely funny, but don't make fun of other people, and don't make fun of yourself in a way that makes you look like you don't have confidence. You can make jokes about yourself that are not offensive to yourself. They're not cut downs or insults to yourself. They're just unique experiences. Like, I had this interesting experience where this happened to me and it was funny. And that's fine to bring those kind of things in, awkward situations. Life gives us a lot of strange situations. You can bring those in. Those are humorous. But you don't have to say, oh, I'm an idiot. I always fall over. I'm a klutz. It's not the kind of jokes I'm talking about.
I have a great example of that kind of funniness that actually I used during my interview. It was in the Tell Me About Yourself answer that I had crafted. And I have this experience of living in the US and in Korea, like going back and forth a little bit. And I put that in my Tell Me About Yourself kind of strategically, even though, because now that I was back, even though it was like a childhood experience, I talked about it to bring out my side of multicultural adaptability. But there, I used a description saying, and this is actually a true story. I remember the first day I went to public school in Korea, I was so shocked because I was coming from the US and I lived in a town where majority of people were white. So when I went to Korea and everybody was Asian, what was shocking to me, the first impression was everybody looked the same and everybody's hair is black. Those two things. And I said that during the interview. And I told a story, and I'm not a naturally funny person at all. Like, humor does not come natural to me. So I knew that if I wanted to score something during Tell Me About Yourself, and I wanted that to be scripted in. But I told a story very slowly, right? Kind of engaging them, like with a lot of visuals and like without fail. There was one interviewer that didn't laugh at that point where I said, I was like surprised because, like everybody's hair was black, and they would just kind of like, it's not a big laugh, but it's just a tension releaser, except for one guy, everybody released that tension. So don't make fun of people, as Kevin said, but like, that's a great way to go about it.
And so, yeah, definitely. I think it's just finding that balance with humor. You don't want to don't try to, the goal is not to be a stand-up comedian either and try to get everyone cracking up. I mean, that's going to throw things off big time, but you want to find that balance. Throw in some humor where you can and where it's appropriate. So bring out your personality too. Like, people, when they're robotic, they're not candidate. Someone who's like robotic, like, this is what I've done. Yourself in the sense of your personality. Don't be yourself in the sense of telling exactly. So there's always a couple different versions of any one story or any kind of response. I don't think it's wise to be non-strategic. Like, so if you said, if someone said to you, what's your greatest strength and weakness, and you say, well, I want to be myself. Let me just say what's the truth here. And you say, yeah, I have we mentioned in one of the last workshops, so I have a drinking problem. That's not the kind of be yourself that I mean. What I'm trying to say is, be your authentic personality, bring that through. Be strategic about what you say, but do it and deliver it in an authentic tone, an authentic way. And so if you make humor if you have humor that you talk with your friends and stuff, you can bring that into your delivery of these things. Let me have Alyssa, do you want to answer?
Yeah. Yes, one question in particular stood out, and I do want to address this. Somebody asked, which burr between 55 and 56 is better for class 2? It's kind of a loaded question because that's not usually the burr of choice for a class 2. The burr of choice for a class 2 is actually 330. However, if you're going to UOP, their class 2 requirements are different from any other school that I'm aware of. They're the only school that, instead of wanting a slightly convergent class 2 with an undercut, they actually want a parallel walled class 2. So you would use either a 55 or a 56 to finish the prep. Now, was it yesterday or this morning, actually, earlier today, we had a member meeting talking about this. I think we talked about UOP's criteria, only UOP's criteria on class 2s for 30 or 40 minutes. So if you're a member, go in and watch it. If you're not a member, if you become one, you will have access to that. And you need to watch this before going to UOP. They also want you to create retention grooves. This took me like 40 minutes to go through, so I can't go through this right now. But retention grooves, they want dovetail, and then how to go about creating the parallel walls. But between a 55 and a 56, my personal choice would be a 56, because 55 is small. And when you use a burr that is smaller, like, okay, 56 has a diameter of 0.8. For class 2s, you want our isthmuses to be 1. So it is already wider than the 56. If we use a burr that is too small, it's very easy to leave marks on the floor. And you're gonna be like, oh, let me get rid of this mark, and go down a little bit, and you'll leave a mark somewhere else, and you'll be like, oh my God, let me get rid of this mark again. You do not wanna fall into that cycle. So because of that, 55, in my opinion, is a little bit too small for cavity preparations. And so there are a lot of other like questions, and I'm sorry that we like can't go through everything, but I did want to kind of touch on that because it had a lot of other things in it. And you want to use coarse burr for your preparations. That's what's going to be given to you. Medium grit is likely not going to be provided. It's going to be coarse. Okay, Kevin, do you have any other points that you would like to talk about?
You know, someone asked kind of like, what do we, with the interview mastery, do we give you feedback based on your personal situation, your CV, your SOP? And the answer to that is absolutely. Like, when we do a mock interview with you, and you schedule that session with us, we review and ask you to upload all of your critical documents, if we don't already have them, your CV, your SOP, and anything else, any research you want to include, whatever you want us to know about you, stuff that you would expect that your interviewers will have, so that we can really tailor those questions to you based on your experience. And we'll actually ask follow-up questions about, okay, what's this gap about, you know, and help you practice those kind of things. Or what's, you know, I see that you didn't pass the MBA Part 1 the first time. Let's talk about that. It will help you practice those specifically. So it's not just a generic, you know, you do have videos that do apply to everyone. Everyone can get value out of those, but then we really work with you and tailor them around you. The other things you can do is you can ask specific questions in our forums where we will really get in there and give you guidance. So we really encourage people to use those forums and ask questions. Those are available all the time, 24 hours a day. And we usually get back to you within usually a day or so. And also other people will have ideas that they'll chime in and give you ideas about. So that's a great way to get that personalized feedback that you need. I would say in general, you know, we just want to help you guys out. We really want to see you succeed. We really want to see you get to dental school, get into a US dental program, and start your process to becoming a practitioner in the US. You know, there's so many talented people out there. You guys are it. What's to stop? You know, what can we do to help you get through there and get through those roadblocks, basically?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for coming. The offer we talked about earlier, available until tomorrow night.
Yes. Put that
if you may interview somewhere, like, this is the best value we've ever put together.
Yeah.
Go pick it up for yourself. Even if you don't get accepted this year, if that does happen, you are still a member with us. You keep the courses until you get accepted. So I think that's important to note. And yeah, so if you have any questions about it, you can always reach us at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. Let me just type that in for you. I hope I didn't make a typo. I think I did good. Okay, so yeah, that's it. I love getting to chat with members during the one-on-one consulting session. I always personally get amazed at like how much we cover and how much clarity applicants gain by just talking for an hour. Yeah, so like so much can happen in an hour, and just with the fact that like the consulting session with Kevin and I are in the deal, it's like honestly a no-brainer. So get it while it's still there, and if you have any questions, just ask us. And I think that's all. Well, thank you so much for coming, you guys. Rewatch this and take notes, okay?
Take care. Thank you all for coming, and thanks for your questions. It was really fantastic.
Yes, we had a lot of fun.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.